So you've been climbing your Retatrutide dose for weeks, months, 2 milligrams, then 4, 6, maybe even 8. Hell, maybe you went to 12. But the scale, it isn't moving the way that it did when you started. So you're doing the logical thing. You're getting ready to go higher, unless you're at 12, of course. And I want you to stop before you do that, because you almost certainly don't have a Retatrutide problem. You have a dosing problem. And the solution is the exact opposite of what you think. I'm Dr. Jones, DC, and I've coached thousands of people through GLP-1 protocols and probably hundreds on Retatrutide, and just as many through the part that almost nobody sees coming. Getting off them entirely or settling into a low dose or a microdose, far lower than they'd ever imagined that they could maintain their weight on. That vantage point is why I can tell you that the number on your syringe matters more than almost anything else that you're doing right now. Now, the people who stall and the people who don't, they're on the same drug, but what separates them is how they approach dosing. So let me show you the trap that almost everybody walks into first. So when you started Retatrutide, you were probably handed a schedule. Start here. Go up in a few weeks, go up again a few weeks after that, climb, climb, climb on a calendar, and it feels official. So you follow it, right? But think about where that schedule actually comes from. It comes from the clinical trials. And in a trial, the whole point is to push the dose up on a fixed timeline so researchers can measure what happens at those higher numbers. The schedule was built to collect clean data on a large group of people. It was never built to find the dose that works best for you. See, that's the dose escalation trap. You keep climbing because the calendar says to do so, not because your body is asking you to. And every step up, it has a cost, more side effects, smaller added returns for each increase. And the higher you go, the more medication it can take to hold the same results. You can end up needing a much bigger dose than you ever actually required, just because you climbed past the point where it was already working. So sit with that for a second. Standard was never designed for you. It was designed for a study. And you've been told the real dose, the one that counts, is 4 milligrams or higher, and that everything under it is just a warm-up. See, that number came off of a trial protocol, and it's not a fundamental law, especially being applicable to your biology. And that belief, that low doses, they don't really count, is the thing quietly keeping you on the elevator. Now, real quick, before we bust that myth wide open, if you're sitting there realizing that you might already be climbing the wrong direction, that's exactly the kind of thing that our team sorts out on a free discovery call. There's no pressure, there's no pitch, just a straight answer on where you stand and what it looks like to work with us. And I'll tell you more about that at the end. But for now, stay with me here, because this next part is what makes this whole low dose approach make sense. So let's take that belief head on, because it's the wall that everything else is built on. So the story going around is that below 4 milligrams, Retatrutide is basically just expensive tirzepatide. The way people say it online is that you're paying for 3 receptors, but only using 2. That the third one doesn't switch on until you climb high enough. Now, it's a clean story, but it's also just not how the drug works. Retatrutide is built to work on 3 different targets in your body at the same time. It's designed to engage all 3 of those targets across every dose that's been studied, including the lower ones. There's no secret 4 milligram line where the third one just suddenly powers on. By design, it's active from your very first dose. Now, the simplest way to hold it in your head, people treat this drug like a light switch, off until you hit some magic number, and then on. It's not a switch, it's a dial. At a low dose, all 3 targets are turned on, just gently. As the dose goes up, they turn up with it. There's no dead zone at the bottom where nothing's happening. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I hear it all the time. But Dr. Jones, if I'm sitting at a low dose, aren't I just paying a premium for the same thing tirzepatide gives me? I saw this video saying that I need 4 milligrams for it to work. And the difference is the whole reason Retatrutide exists. See, tirzepatide works on 2 targets. Retatrutide adds that third, the glucagon. And it isn't doing more appetite work, it's doing metabolic work. It helps mobilize stored fat, and we believe it nudges up how many calories you burn at rest. Now, that's the piece that tirzepatide doesn't have, and it's running the whole time, even down on lower doses. So a low dose of Retatrutide isn't just expensive tirzepatide. You're getting that metabolic engine from the start. The question was never whether a low dose does something, it's finding the dose where it does the right amount. A completely different game than climb until it hurts. So the belief flips. Low doses aren't the intro. They're not even the warm-up act before the real dose. Now, for a lot of people, a low dose is the real dose. They just never stopped climbing long enough to find out. And if that idea that a low dose might be your real scale dose just landed, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because this is the kind of thing that I break down here on this channel every single week, and I'd hate for you to miss out on the next one, so turn on that bell. Okay, so quick gut check first. True or false? Below 4 milligrams, Retatrutide only works on 2 of its 3 targets. I want you to sit with that before you answer the question. Okay, so how do you actually find your dose? It starts by throwing out the goal that you've probably been chasing. Most people are dosing toward zero hunger. They want to feel nothing. No cravings, no interest in food, the volume all the way off. And any return of the hunger, they read as a sign that the dose is too low. That's the mistake. Zero hunger isn't the target. It's a warning sign. And on Retatrutide, chasing it is especially easy to get wrong. Now, a lot of the patients that I coach tell me the same thing after they switch. For something like tirzepatide, some food noise is still here. That leftover hunger is not your scoreboard. Remember that third target, the metabolic one? On this drug, a huge part of the work is happening on the metabolic side, mobilizing fat, doing things that can't feel as a hunger level at all. So if you're grading your dose only by how quiet the food noise goes, you're watching one gauge on a drug that's running on 3. You keep climbing to chase total silence, and you'll sail right past your sweet spot, pushing the number up for a feeling when the part that actually matters was already working down lower. What you're really aiming for is the sweet spot, the therapeutic window. That's the dose where constant food noise settles down. Not all the way down to silence, but enough that you're not fighting it all day. While normal, healthy hunger still shows up in the meantimes. You can eat a reasonable meal, feel satisfied, and walk away. The obsession loosens its grip. The appetite is still there. That's the target. Picture your dose on a range with 3 zones. On the left end, you're genuinely fighting hunger at the table. You're underdosed, and yes, here you nudge up the dose. In the middle is the sweet spot, where hunger is controlled, but still normal. And on the high end is the zone almost nobody warns you about. It's over suppression. That's where the dose is so strong that you barely want to eat at all. That high zone is a freaking trap. It's not a win. When you're that suppressed, you eat very little, and it can go on for days and weeks. Your body notices that the fuel, it's been cut off dramatically, and it does the sensible thing. It slows everything down to protect you. Your energy drops, progress stalls. I call that the GLP-1 crash, and here's the part that connects straight back to where we started. The person who's stuck at 6 milligrams of Reta, watching the scale sit still, convinced they need to go higher. A lot of them aren't underdosed at all. They're oversuppressed. They climbed right past their sweet spot into the crash. And the fix is to come down, not up. I know. Mind blown, right? That's the whole reveal of this video. So let me say it plainly. The correct dose isn't the highest one that you can tolerate. It's the lowest one that keeps your hunger controlled. Correct dosing in the long haul should trend down, not up. This is the low dosing strategy, and it's the opposite of the escalator. You're not climbing to find a ceiling. You're settling onto the smallest amount that does the job that you need it to do. And when I dialed in my own GLP-1 use, this is exactly what surprised me. I ended up needing far less than I expected to. And it works better at that lower amount than it ever did on those higher doses. And I've watched the same thing play out with person after person who I coach. So how do you actually dial it in? You move slowly and you let your hunger be the gauge. Not the calendar, not anything else. Your hunger control. You find the lowest dose where the food noise settles and you can eat like a normal person again, or as close to a normal person as you can achieve. And you hold it there. If you're still genuinely fighting physical hunger, real at the table hunger, not just background thoughts about food that you can easily control, that's where a small nudge up in your dose makes sense. But if you've stopped wanting to eat almost entirely, that's not victory, even though I know it feels like it might be. That's your signal that you've gone too far, and it's time to ease back down. The dial does the talking. Your job is just to listen instead of just following a schedule. And hey, if you're one of the people who's been stuck, I actually want to hear about it. Let me know in the comments and tell me, how long have you been on Retatrutide? How long have you been stalled? Like, how long has it been dragging on? And what you've already tried to break it. Because I do my best to read as many of these comments as possible, and the most common patterns that I see are probably going to end up being some of the future videos that I make. Now, before we go further, the correct dose is the one that gives you which of these? Zero hunger, controlled hunger, or the maximum dose that you can tolerate. Lock in your answer, because if you said controlled hunger, you got it right. Yay! You're actually paying attention here, because my goal is for you to learn. Now, once you're sitting in that sweet spot, Something opens up most people on this drug never even considered as possible. The question that I get more than almost any other: Dr. Jones, do I have to be on this medication forever? And I understand the fear behind it. Nobody wants to feel chained to a medication for the rest of their life. We got enough of that problem going on already in this society. So let me tell you what I've personally have seen. And I want to be clear that this is what I've watched work with people who I coach. This isn't a promise or a guarantee for everybody. When you dose correctly from the start, when you find that sweet spot instead of climbing the elevator, you give yourself options later that the high dose climbers don't have anymore. Think of the medication like training wheels. Training wheels aren't meant to stay on the bike forever. They're there to hold you steady while you learn to balance on your own. The dose is doing the same thing. It's quieting the food noise so that you have the room to build the habits that eventually keep you steady without as much help. The whole usable range slides down over time. You're not sliding into too low. The floor itself is moving. That's what I mean by metabolic independence, the point where your own body is doing more of the work and the medication is doing less. And there are a few ways people get there. Some settle into microdosing maintenance, a genuinely tiny dose, well below where they started, just enough to hold the line. Some of our patients go through what I call a medication reset. They taper down under medical supervision, they take a planned break at 0, say 3 or 4 weeks, and they come back at it at a much lower dose than before. And in my experience, what appears to be happening is the body resensitizes to the lower dose and it responds, again, better at the lower dose. Holy crap, it's like magic. And for some people, over time, they might even step off the medication entirely. So the horizon looks completely different than the one that you were handed. You were told to climb and stay. What I've watched instead is people doing low, dosing low, holding steady, and slowly needing less, not more. Now, the honest part that I won't skip past, when people stop these medications abruptly, with no plan, the research is pretty consistent that a lot of the weight tends to come back. And I've seen this play out too as well. That's real. But that's exactly the argument for doing this deliberately instead of just quitting one day. The medication buys you a window of opportunity, time when the food noise is quiet enough to build the foundation underneath. What you do with that window decides entirely whether that door stays open. And that part is very hard to navigate alone. And I can already feel the next question forming. Okay, Dr. Jones, how do I actually taper down? That's its own full breakdown. Microdosing maintenance, the medication reset, the whole path off the medication. If that's a video that you want me to make, let me know in the comments and I'll serve it up. Okay, so let's put the whole picture together. Retatrutide is powerful precisely because it works on 3 targets at once instead of just 1. That's the upside. And it's real. But that same thing is the reason you don't want to freelance it. 3 targets working together means there's simply more going on in your body that deserves a set of trained eyes on it. And that's the Reta trade-off. More power and more that needs careful watching. The power is worth having. It's just worth having with somebody in your corner. And that's really the whole reason I made this video. Finding your sweet spot, knowing when you're oversuppressed and need to come down, using the window to build towards getting off the elevator instead of just riding along forever. That is not a thing that most people can map out alone from a dosing schedule and a few forum threads. So if you're serious about doing this right, do this. Book a free discovery call with our team. It's genuinely free and it's a conversation worth having, not a sales pitch. One of our patient educators will walk you through where you're at right now, whether you're stalled, climbing, or just starting out, and then help you figure out what working with us actually looks like. If the number on your syringe has felt like a guessing game, this is how you stop guessing. The link in the description or text the number on the screen, tap it, grab a time, and let's get your dose working for you instead of against you. Oh, and if the question underneath all of this, whether Retatrutide is even the right drug for you in the first place versus something like tirzepatide, the tried and true medication, which we still prescribe a lot of, I broke that exact decision down right here. So go watch that video next. We'll see you guys later.